Hi, this is Ilka Cassidy with Passive House Accelerator, and thanks for tuning in to the special bonus episode of the Passive House podcast recorded at PhiusCon 23 in Houston, Texas. And a big thank you to Solar Windows for their support of the series. Sayo.
Hi, Yuka.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Happy to see you here. And you traveled from very far away.
Yes.
Can you introduce yourself and tell us where you come from and what you do?
Okay. My name is Sayo Okada, and I now live in Japan. And a city that I live in is Nara. Countryside, but I work with a lot of builders and architects that are trying to build the past buildings or learn about the past building strategies. And and I also a board member of Pascal Institute Japan, affiliate with Phius. And I teach a CPC course. I translate all the training materials and switch to the metric units. And we teach all the architects that wants to learn how to build the passive buildings in that country. And so that's what I do. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really interesting. So you're basically taking the Phius standard and you're bringing it back to Japan.
Yeah.
And you are teaching others to be CPHCs, but you really have to look at all the targets and think about what that means in relationship to your climate and to your culture.
Right. Yeah.
So what are the challenges?
Yeah. So there's many challenges so first, the energy code is not as developed as US, that convincing the architects to do the level that requires to be passive buildings, and air tightness is something that I have a challenging experience to convince that it is important. The Japanese culture has traditionally is open to nature, and not really enclosed buildings are not something that they traditionally is not part of the design. So having that kind of like a new concept and some, the convincing them to do the air tightness is really important for energy conservation is a challenge. Also, passive building is originally developed in Western culture, and Asian cultures are a little different. We don't wear shoes. We sit on the floor. Not all the time, not all the families, but so the temperature of the floor is something that we all kind of have a person like more important to us, and that's also cultural. And also we take bath every day, and that makes the moisture level higher. And another thing I'm finding out is that Japanese single-family house is much smaller, and the Japanese people live in a smaller house, but the 1,000 square feet is normal single-family with 4 people living. So that the Phius target, sometimes it is hard to meet with a cooling load, and so that's one challenge. And then also Japan is so dense that getting us enough solar energy sometimes is harder because all the buildings are built sitting right next to each other. So getting our solar energy in right amount and the right location is pretty difficult sometimes. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there are a lot of things that we don't really think about, right? Or, of course, Phius didn't really think about when they developed the targets. How about your climate?
Yeah, the climate is hot and humid. Climate 3 is where generally a lot of people live in, but we have a climate like Boston, like climate 5 to climate 2 within that small island, like size of California. So, work with one architect in climate 3, and the next day I'm working with a climate 5. So it's very important to kind of know their climate. And also, I feel like there's a more microclimate areas because we have a flat area, and then we have like right next to it, it's really high mountain. So that kind of like microclimate may not be represented in a climate data that we have within the calculator. So that I find in that climate is a little bit more challenging. And then also within that small area that we have so many climate that I have to be conscious about.
So how do you get your climate data that you can import into WFOE? Is that something that Phius supports you with?
Yeah. So Phius supported with us with the climate data. Astray has many data of Japan already that can be transferred to that data format that can be used with the WFOE. Also, Phius created the calculator that has that climate data in that Phius 2021 calculator. So, and then with the Japanese translation. So that was a great step forward to having that Phius building standard applied to the area.
Yeah, it's almost like the beginnings of Passive House here in the US, right?
Yeah.
Where everything needed to be translated from German into English.
Right, yeah. And then, SI units and all the technical terms that weren't really translated well, because they have all this technical term that I didn't understand it because I was working in Boston 20 years, and it's almost new architecture term that I had to learn.
But I mean, obviously you see value in Passive House in your culture and in your climate. So how do you go about handling the hot and humid climate? Because Boston for sure wasn't that.
It's challenging because it is first the wall assembly is very tricky. We have really hot and humid climates in the summer, but we do have winter weather so I oftentimes kind of getting nervous about the membranes and then have to do the WFOE Pro analysis to make sure that it is working well in hydrothermally. But also the winter, it works well to have a larger windows, but we have a hot and humid summer that we don't need that much windows during the summer. So having the shading devices or like right amount of glazing is pretty tricky to manage.
And then you're also, because of cultural differences, you're also working with Phius on setting up almost different rules. Not necessarily rules, but for example, your ventilation system is slightly different. Something that might not be acceptable here in the US is something that in your climate and culture might be adjusted or adapted. Actually the standard has to be adapted towards that.
I think the ventilation scheme is recently I have been challenged by ventilation manufacturer that yes, we do take bath all the time, so there's a lot of moisture happenings, and then the manufacturer sometimes no, you can't incorporate it into the part of the ventilation system, so you have to use the exhaust only system, and that creates interior too dry. So there's a couple of new schemes that we have been working with the builders that pretty inspiring. Like for instance, the living room conditioned air, dumped it into the bathroom to get that moisture to the living room, so that the interior has some moisture in it. So it's complicated with working in the hot and humid, and then that culture, the combination is tricky.
Well, it's great that you're tackling it.
Yeah.
And then one interesting thing too is because there's not a lot of people that are CPHCs or raters
Right.
yet, right? So you actually had to become a rater, but in order to actually rate buildings, you need CPHCs.
Right. Yeah. So the first I trained a CPHC. There's 10 of them out there right now in Japan, and so that I can be a rater. So it was a process to certify projects, so that now I can be a rater. So now we have 3 projects going, and a couple more coming next year. So hopefully I can also build the rater culture there that are not there yet.
Well, sounds like you have a lot of work to do.
Yes.
And I wish you a lot of success.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking to me.